Hey! No, it's not your turn! The sunshine is so beautiful.
Once heard the story of our scientists to see great ball lab coated men with glasses and goatees. They track the capsules as they streaked across the sky and wave the handkerchiefs as Jim Jim went bye-bye. Oh God! I am
Welcome to Escape Velocity. My name is Scott, and I'll be your host. I've only recently figured out that I have attention deficit disorder. You would think that that would be obvious after knowing me for a little while. Had all the symptoms, and, Attention Deficit League! Prepare to... Hey, games. Wow. What was I gonna say? Had all the symptoms, difficulty holding still, focusing on a certain subject, being distracted by other things. Certainly, it has its benefits also, the ability to associate, to take things that hadn't previously been put together, and put them together, and present them as a worldview. The ability to see a new thing, know that it's risky, and take that risk and implement the new whatever it is. That's the entrepreneurial spirit. That's also solid ADD. What you lack is the ability to block out stimuli. It's not that you can't pay attention, it's that you're paying attention to everything equally. Everything, a drip of water off the roof, the honking of a horn, dog barking in the background, the television going on, the person having a conversation with you, the fact that your house is on fire. I'm married to Mary Sheridan, a painter, another distracted artist. Life is a big, spontaneous, creative adventure with her. It's very difficult for us to function, to balance the checkbook, get the kids off to school, to implement the everyday activities without a major crisis. With Mary and I and our two kids, often the simplest thing is a crisis. In fact, the more complicated things are usually not a crisis as much. We usually handle actual crises better than most people. We're used to tons of stimuli coming in all the time, unguarded and uncensored, which is inherent in a crisis. We've traveled across the country twice, in a big roundabout way, gone pretty much spontaneously wherever we wanted to, the second time with our kids just last summer. The traveling across the country was not the problem at all. That was a nice adventure. The problem was like packing the suitcase and getting in the car and remembering to take all the stuff that adults and kids need. That was the difficult part. Our first stop was going to be in a big town in West Virginia. We got there and it was all smokestacks and industrial crap. And we were like, no, don't want to stay there. Found someplace more interesting in Ohio, and I think it was Ohio. We went to Memphis right before Elvis's anniversary of his death. Tons and tons of Elvis impersonators. I'm pretty sure I stayed in Kansas. I have a really vivid mental picture of the fields and the feeling of it and the people, but I couldn't tell you the towns that I stayed in. We went to Metropolis, Illinois, saw the Superman Museum, which I saw as a kid. We also traveled around my dad's hometown. My parents are from Southern Illinois. Even though I've never really hung out in the Midwest at all, I feel like there's a little bit of a quality of Midwestness to me. The flat nasal way of speaking. Colorado Springs, I remember. Then we went down to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where Mary's parents are. Everything's made of mud and put together in a way that, is very, very bedrock, but on a mountain. Beautiful. Mary and I met in graduate school in Baltimore at the Maryland Institute College of Art. I was a year ahead of her. At the time, I had really long, straight hair. It was kind of the grunge era. It was 108 degrees or something insane in Baltimore in our unair-conditioned studios. So I'm painting these big, vigorous paintings, sweaty as all get out. Probably haven't taken a shower that day. So it's my job somehow, because I was next to this door, to answer the door. I go to answer the door, and it's this guy in a cowboy hat. And behind him is this girl. And if she wasn't wearing a pink sweater with a poodle on it, she should have been. So the guy in the cowboy hat's like, "Hi, how you doing?" We had a mutual underwhelming first impression. Mary's like, "Ooh, greasy, sweaty, long-haired guy." And I was like, "Ooh, poodle sweater girl." Mary is from Dallas, Texas, and never really fit in very well. I'm proud of Mary for making her own path. That always takes a lot of courage. Not only courage, but vision. Real vision is hard to come by and often comes with a high price. Usually a person with some truth or insight that goes against the grain of society. It's like they present an idea, people sense truth in it. If they sense truth in it that involves change, it's threatening. Other people say, "Oh, he has this new idea, let's get him." They usually get killed. 20 years go by and they go, "That wasn't such a bad idea." And then it gets implemented. Then after a while, another 20 years or so, it becomes the norm. It becomes the accepted standard. When it becomes the accepted standard, all the bureaucrats move in and they organize the closets and they make sure everything works on schedule. And then that becomes institutional. And then the next person has an idea. It's like, "Hey, this could be better this way." And those same people are like, "No, we do it this way." "Oh, he had an idea, let's kill him." And the process repeats itself.
You hate money, you hate church, you hate society and the consequences. You're angry, you're difficult, you're not ready to the ancient hippie. You're the one who's repressed, you think therefore you're depressed. You're wrapped in the bone, you were later born in a jar.
Great religious arguments through the ages. You're going to go to hell. No, you're going to go to hell. You are. No, you're going to go to hell. You're going to go to hell. No, you are. You are. You're going to go to hell. No, you are. I've read a theory that America is predisposed to ADD, risk-taking type of people. Who were the people that came to America? People that were willing to give up everything and get on a small ship and travel 3,000 miles, where they had at least a fairly high risk of death, in order to live in some new wilderness. Some of them for religious freedom, some for the spirit of adventure, I imagine, some out of necessity because they were escaping bad stuff. That is the most extreme type of personality. That really is a textbook definition ADD type personality. It's the artist, the rebel, the creative person, the entrepreneur, the risk taker, the person impatient for truth and with no tolerance for what other people can tolerate because it's the social norm. That's the person that changes things. Every single significant change in the human condition has been brought about by that process of thought. If everybody was an artist that didn't know where their keys were, that doesn't help society very much. The other abilities are just as important and just as necessary. But don't let yourself be trivialized because you're not the best accountant in the world. Without the creative people, accounting is irrelevant. What you're accounting for is the original idea, the creative impulse. I was born as an army brat. My dad retired when I was about 10. I was a surprise later in their life. My sister was 20 and getting married by the time I was born. The middle sister is 12 years older than me. It was basically like 3 generations of kids. My parents had kids in the house school age that they took care of for over 40 years. You know, my dad being a career Army guy, it's like they had a kid in between each war. I came along. I was hyperactive. My mom called me the tornado. I'm sure that I was like not what they were expecting for their retirement. In fact, we almost, when my dad retired, almost moved to a retirement village in Florida. It's like they forgot they had a kid, but we didn't. We moved to Warrenton, Virginia, which was enough of a culture shock. I found myself affecting a southern accent to try to blend in. That was in 7th grade, junior high school. So junior high school, that didn't help the self-image. You know, I was already the weird artist, and high school was the same rural environment, but it was a larger school, a larger influx of artists, unusual people. I consciously reinvented myself, clothes, haircut. So I was still a freak, but I was a more confident freak. Let me pee, and I'll be right back. Okay. My dad, he bought me a used Pinto, the kind that explode. And having received no instruction other than 2 weeks of driver's ed, I then was driving my car and, you know, I was a teenager and it was the 70s. And I just thought the way to drive, if you're cool, is just to drive as fast as possible. You know, it was like exciting to hear the wheels screech every corner you take. And Warrenton, it's a rural place and you know, there's a million little 2-lane roads with hairpin turns. I'm like, within 2 weeks, I completely totaled that car. I flipped it over, I took a turn, went off the road, rolled it over twice, and it landed in somebody's yard, made a big crater, twisted on its axis, all the metal twisted, the glass breaking, flying out. Thanks. Sorry. What was I saying about comic books? It was prom night, lost my virginity. I was always interested in weird, aberrant girls that were just a mess.
I met her last night at Club Amber Gray. She was wrapped up in a tattered shroud.
3-month to 6-month relationships, went to college, and college was my first experience having anything on my own. You know, in terms of, finding where I put my wallet and my keys, forget it. I was in my 20s. One thing I knew that I wanted was to live in a city. I wanted to live in an urban environment because I grew up in a suburb. Then I grew up in a sub-suburb, and I wanted to have an urban experience. I wanted to be a city dweller. Somebody showed me Baltimore as a city. At that time, they were starting to build an artist's housing place. It was affordable, big loft-style artist housing where creative people could live inside the city. Went up there both to interview for the College of Art for graduate school and to look at the artist's housing. And somebody picked me up from the train station and gave me a ride, and I'm like, hey, this is not so bad. Hey, this is cool. And we would just keep going, and the neighborhoods would get worse and worse. I was like, oh, well, this is not... Oh. So we were a bunch of naive, poor artists that got this place in the middle of the housing projects and burnt out buildings, all bright colors and fake facades. Everybody got broken into. Slowly, I did become a city person. We were getting visiting artists that were people that were as famous as living artists can be in our limited little insular art world. People that were in the art magazines and that perhaps I'd seen before, and they were coming to tell us what they thought of our paintings. And I was like, wow, they'll be able to really give me some good feedback. And what it was, one guy'd be like, more color! And the next one would be like, less color! And the next guy'd be like, bigger! Smaller! Are you a modernist in a postmodern society or a postmodernist in a modern society? And blah, 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 blah. All the bureaucrats march in after something's been established and stomp all over it and make it this joyless convention. I constitutionally could not do that. You're not a nonconformist like everyone else. So for better for worse, I was whatever I was. A weird mixture of everything. And kind of picking and choosing my own and making my own culture of one. Mary had a studio next to mine in graduate school for that second year, and we got to know each other gradually and started hanging out and talking about each other's work. We remained friends for a year. We both were dating other people. She had a boyfriend in Texas, and I had a girlfriend up there with me in Baltimore. In fact, Mary used to hang out with my girlfriend Nancy and I and go places in groups with us. I remember us all being out in a car. Mary and I were the only people that had been to some place before. We were trying to get us to a club or whatever, and we were just hopelessly lost. We just had no idea. Neither of us had any kind of remote sense of direction. I remember Nancy laughing derisively at us and saying, "Oh, you two better never have children." So, we had children. So after about a year, we were both free, and we started going out. And she was like a really goofy, sunny person, really up, and talking a million miles an hour and having these adventures and being kind of silly and spacey. And she shaved her head bald. You know, her parents were like, they were thinking she was suicidal. That was her big physical rebellion to say, you know, I don't want to be this little Texas debutante. She was anorexic for many years and bulimic and had recovered from that. I think that was her final separation. And also she looked really good bald. She had a good bald head. During that time, I didn't want to paint. I felt like I had traded one closed-minded perspective for another. I formed a rock band. We played local clubs, we made an album, and we did pretty well. Besides just liking pop music, it appealed to me because it didn't have the intellectual pretensions, because it was regarded as essentially disposable or commercial art. This is a very ADD thing to do. I wanted to do paintings. I got in a lot of painting shows, went to graduate school, mingled with the New York art world, and then I formed a rock band. We were kind of looking around for a new place to live. Baltimore, yes, I was an urban dweller. I lived there for 6 or 7 years, and I felt like that was a really good thing for me. I felt less naive in ways. I got what I needed out of it. One day at a flea market, they were selling blood-stained white hospital towels that people might want to buy. That just suddenly seemed like a symbol for how I was living, for how I was thinking, and I suddenly wanted a place where I wasn't looking over my shoulder, worrying if I'd be shot all the time.
Other towns may have their farms and cobble roads, but not the charms.
We were visiting friends in New England in a small town, Northampton, Massachusetts. It's an artsy little college town, had lots of culture in it. At the time, that seemed like just what I wanted. I kept saying it was a practical example of my ideals. And in many ways it was. Such a change from our place in Baltimore. People didn't lock their doors, and people were relatively civil. Most of the people you saw on the streets were not, bleeding or drunk. Different people were coexisting. Lesbian couples were openly kissing on the street. Which I enjoyed on many levels. They started the National Comic Book Museum there, and it was filled with bands and a lot of art. Still single, and we were, it was with Mary, but we were just staying up all night and having a really nice time there. Mary and I got married. We decided to have our wedding in Virginia. My parents were getting older, and my mom had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, so that was going to be the only way that they could attend the wedding. Found a place we wanted to get married in the Shenandoah Mountains. It was a winery, and it had a place where you can get married outside on a platform. And brought this little crowd of odd people from Northampton and elsewhere, along with the relatives and everything. So anyway, we had this horrible, horrible storm. Felt like we were going to die before getting married. And then at the last minute, the clouds parted, the sun came out, and it was beautiful, and a rainbow came up over the wedding. In fact, it was so unbelievably beautiful that it looks like we went to a department store and they pulled down a cheesy pull down of nature behind us. I just thought that was really appropriate for us. We've always had a kind of up and down, kind of volatile relationship. Like I said, normal things are pretty difficult for us. So, that's us living a life of heavy-handed metaphor. Mary found out she was pregnant, but not with the kids that we do have, with a little girl named Sarah. And, at that time, I had an impulse to not change. Like I I knew intellectually, that how could things not change if you had a kid? But I had an impulse to just stay the course, keep being in my band, keep being in our apartment. And unfortunately, that impulse turned out to be right. We found out in the first sonogram that she didn't form right and that Sarah wasn't capable of living outside of the womb. And, we were really devastated. And then we come home and there's a message on the answering machine. Mary's best friend from Texas has been killed, run over by a truck in Chicago on her bicycle. So that was our day.
Dry my eyes, clench my teeth, look down, stare at my feet. Easy loving never comes my way.
Several months later, she got pregnant again. This time I knew things would change. This time I had the opposite impulse. I was like, the jig's up. Time to be a grown-up. I was at a point where I was ready to change. How consciously I knew it and what direction I thought I should go in, I don't know. But it seems in retrospect very appropriate. I think it was really time for me to quit being a 30-year-old teenager. I started looking for a house for the first time I thought about being a homeowner. Found one in East Hampton, which is a suburb, a little ranch house. Watched my son being born. And then they immediately handed him to me to put this little tiny G.I. Joe-sized shirt on. And then left. There's Mary, and, she opted for all the drugs, no natural childbirth. She's looking like a murder scene and in a great mood. And I'm left alone with a baby while, everybody is fixing her up. And I'm like, trying to get that little wiggly new 2-second-old thing to put on its shirt. And I'm like, oh, God. And then they sent him home without an instruction booklet to us. Well, good luck! So we were raising a kid in a house. We really wanted him to have a companion, so then our second son was born, and he came out okay. And, believe me, after our experience with our first daughter that was not capable of living, I was counting every finger. It's a miracle when everything works right. It's a miracle when that little thing that's never taken a breath or digested or anything, comes out, is okay, and cries. I mentioned that my mom had developed Alzheimer's. All in all, my dad pretty much took care of her, even under the worst conditions at the end. She passed away in her house. Among other reasons, we decided to relocate to Virginia at that time to be near my dad. We still reside there outside of the D.C. area. We've both been painting a lot. We certainly had our ups and downs. My relationship with Mary has not always been easy, but it was my best, favorite choice. So I believe that ADD is not so much a disability as it is an evolutionary trade-off. In order for real progress in human thought to occur, it's necessary to have people that can take in and synthesize ideas in an unguarded fashion. Take in everything, examine it, and put it together in a new way. In order to do that, in order to take in that unguarded stimuli and not be able to prioritize in a way that would enable you to, say, find your keys, that's where the evolutionary trade-off is. We're a family of 4 people that couldn't pay attention to what you're supposed to pay attention to if their life depended on it. But the flip side of that is we're open to new ideas and adventures. We notice things and connect things that weren't there before. We're the artists. We're the people that have the ideas and change things. That's something to be valued. So that's it.
Brought it back. Grace Artigan's my teacher. Franz Klein worked in white and black. Rothko and his color fields and spiritual exploring. Sometimes I think they're serene and sometimes f***ing boring. Painters from the Middle Ages, I don't care that much about the futurists, synthetic Cubans. Frankly, I've begun to doubt that Picasso followed an inner vision. Cezanne showed new ways to see. And Jackson Pollock was an alcoholic.